This is the Fantasy Roadshow.
Welcome in, all you roadies, to another episode of the Roadshow with Mike and Ryan. We are your hosts. You can find me on Twitter at fantasy_trucker. You can find him on Twitter at Culls_sports. Mike, how you doing today? What's going on? What's going on in the Kulzicki life?
We are live.
Oh, live.
Not much. What did I have to say? Oh, is much. Last night, watched Whiplash.
Oh, great movie.
It was an outstanding movie. I was thinking about complimenting Ryan and how outstanding of a job that he's done with the launching of this podcast. But then I watched Whiplash and it completely changed my view on if you're demanding success and growth and continuing to strive for better, then you have to really watch out how much you compliment someone, because then they get, they get content, and we're going to be striving for greatness here on this podcast. So I'm going to hold off complimenting Ryan until the time is right.
Well, I'll take that in itself as a compliment, so thank you.
However, Ryan said that Miles Teller learned the drums for that movie, and I was like, no, Ryan, if Miles Teller was actually playing the drums, he would be the greatest talent of all time. You can't act that well and then just decide to play the drums that well.
But we looked it up, and he, in fact, did authentically learn how to play the drums for that movie. However, there was use of stunt doubles in certain scenes. So it wasn't him the whole time, but he was authentic. He did authentically learn how to play the drums for that movie, which is just as impressive. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So
we're going to be
talking.
Mike,
what are we talking about today?
We're going to be talking AFC North divisional breakdown. It'll be our first divisional breakdown episode. This is a conference division that I'm extremely excited about. Maybe one of the more exciting ones in general. And I didn't wear this on purpose, but we will be talking about the first place Bayou Bengals, baby.
Yes, we will. Yeah, the Joe Burrow Bengals.
That's right. But yeah, be getting into AFC North, and buckle up.
All right, so I think we're going to start off by ranking who we think is going to finish where in the division.
Standings.
And then, the standings, and then we'll go into how many wins, the final win total that we think they're going to have. So, Mike, why don't you kick us off? Who do you have winning the division, and where do you have everybody else placed?
Yeah, so I think that's a good structure to work through these divisional breakdowns. We'll start off giving our standings and then breaking down from first place team through last, the fantasy outlook we have for each team. But I have the Bengals at 12-5, the Ravens at 11-6, the Browns at 10-7, and the Steelers at 6-11. So kind of like I mentioned too in the intro, I have those top three teams separated by just a game each. And quite honestly, I think the Bengals are going to win the division, but the Ravens and the Browns could just as well win the division. So we got a tight one here. All season, I'm going to be looking forward to watching those Bengals, Ravens, Browns matchups. So yeah, that's what I got. What do you got?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Bengals, Ravens, Browns, Steelers in that order. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right. The Bengals, Ravens, and Browns, it's very likely that we might possibly see all three of them in the playoffs this year.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of AFC divisions where I'm going to be mentioning that, like the AFC East and whatnot. I don't want to give too many teasers, but these three teams are going to be duking it out all season, and I can't wait to watch it. But you're right. The Bengals, they should win the division yet again. They seem like the best team, but there's a lot of things that can happen in the NFL season, as everybody knows. So,
So I agree. It's tough to not take the Bengals as the divisional winner with this current team and how they've been performing the last couple of years. I do think the Ravens got better in which they needed to and just kind of solidified that offense from last year. Zay Flowers is going to be awesome. I'm excited to see the Lamar Dobbins, Flowers, Andrews dynamic for me is a really strong offensive core. And then the Browns is another team that I think is going to take a huge step forward this year. I think Deshaun Watson got to knock off some of that rust, in-game rust late last season. And you have Amari Cooper and Nick Chubb, who is expected to have a career year. So going to be super exciting. I think Pickett also takes a step forward and solidifies his role as a franchise quarterback for the Steelers. Pickens, him and those two together take a big step. So, the Steelers aren't too far off from being kind of right in this competitive bucket where they're all, shooting for the playoff spot. So, exciting.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. It's if the Steelers end up making the steps that they need to offensively, we could easily see them being in contention with this division. But as where it stands right now, I feel like they're pretty firmly cemented on the bottom. Do you have any gambling odds for this division that you wanted to mention right off the bat before we really dive into each team as a whole? I know you have a couple up your sleeve over there.
Well, yeah, I just went to look at the team win totals as I was working through my records, and the odds are over under win totals. Bengals and Ravens were each at 10.5. Browns are at 9.5, and Steelers were at 8.5. So that Vegas line shows that the Steelers are a lot closer to being, competing in that division. So it just shows you how tight that division actually is. And again, just kind of backs up everything we thought there. I do, though, think that the Steelers are, I have them at 6-11 this year. I think it's going to be, I'm probably not giving them enough credit, to be honest. I'll have to revisit that, but it's just so hard to take them over the Browns, Ravens, Steelers, or Bengals in some of those games. But that being said, I don't think it's going to be as bad as last year. So I might have to revisit that, but all of that is to say that you can. I think they're definitely. I'm more confident in the Steelers becoming in last place than I am the Bengals being in first place. So if I was to look at any of the odds, I would look at plus 175 Steelers to get fourth place in their division. You can do an exact result on where you think they'll finish. And I think I'm more confident in Steelers getting last than I am Bengals getting in first. So that would be the one thing that I would look to.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I mean, I completely agree with you. I feel like that's kind of a for sure thing rather than the Bengals winning the division. So, I like those odds.
Yeah, the only way I see the Steelers not getting last is if you see a Burrow, Lamar, or Watson injury. Something that's that big of an impact where that gap closes between the Steelers and that third place team. Oh, yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, it's hard to predict injury, but that's definitely a possibility. And when you're making these future bets, a lot of it hinders on those injuries. It's the reason why the Vegas lines are a lot lower than people think on certain prop bets for players, because it's the majority of the time there's injuries in the NFL. It's a very rough contact sport, so you have to be prepared for that outcome in any future bet that you make.
You definitely hear the sharps talking we prefer focusing on unders because of injury risk. So yeah, totally agree there. But let's talk Bengals. Let's get into the Bengals. First place team. We both have them there. I'll give you a quick breakdown and let you get into it after, but we kind of know what we have with this Bengals offense right now. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, arguably the best duo in the league. T. Higgins, he's there long-term. Joe Mixon restructured his deal. We know what we're going to get with the Bengals offense. It's going to be one of the best in the league. Burrow's going to ball out. Chase is going to ball out. I have Jamar Chase as my wide receiver 1 this year. Burrow's, top 5 quarterback. T. Higgins is right there in the top, I don't know, let me guess, top 20. But anyways, we know what we're getting with the Bengals. Chase Brown should be in the mix a little bit. Kind of change of pace from Joe Mixon. But yeah, that's what I got. Charlie Jones is an interesting slot, rookie slot that, Boyd's got to leave the team. But as of right now, we know what we're getting in that offense.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, do you think Charlie Jones really, sees some playing time this year with Tyler Boyd still active?
Maybe. I mean, depending on how much he progresses, I think he is like a legitimate weapon for them in the near future. So yeah, if it comes in if it comes into his career development, I think the Bengals are going to take it seriously and maybe give him some reps. But
yeah,
Boyd's the number 3. Bengals are going for a Super Bowl. They're not going to do anything that risks that, but they also don't want to hinder his development as a player. So
yeah, no, I like that. No, you're pretty spot on. I mean, it's hard to have a differing opinion about the Bengals when they've been in the AFC Championship game like 2 years in a row. So, they went 12-4 last year, and we kind of have them kind of around that same track record. Joe Mixon did restructure his contract, so he took less money to stay with the team. They still need
less.
Yeah, significantly less money to stay with the team, which is always good to see. So, Mixon is being drafted right now as the RB17, according to Sleeper.
It's good to see, but it's also not good to see if you're one of these Barkley, Jacobs, Pollards that are trying to get paid, and then you see a guy take over half of his salary to stay with the team later in his, he's 28. So I thought that was a good to see for the Bengals, but for the running back market, man, that is so tough.
Yeah, he's 26. Just 26. To be clear, 26. Yeah.
Are you kidding me? You're going to take a half of a 50% haircut on your contract when these guys are all trying to get paid. That's a tough look.
Yeah, it's very discouraging. Definitely not a step in the right direction for running backs, but we'll see what happens. I think Mixon's smart for doing it though, because they would have cut him if he didn't. They would have moved on from him. I think he knew that his, if he didn't take that deal, his days were numbered. But when you're drafting Joe Mixon, he's being drafted right around RB17. I think that's a good value. He's going to be utilized a lot. He's kind of one of those last kind of workhorse running backs. But, the Bengals, they ran the ball the 4th fewest times last season. They just don't run the ball much. And they threw the ball the 7th most. So you're looking at a pass-first offense. So when you're drafting Joe Mixon, you just have to be aware of that and expect not his greatest statistical season. But Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd are, in my opinion, one of the best wide receiver trios in the NFL. It's the reason why Irv Smith, to me, isn't really worth rostering or worth drafting in your average shallow 12-team league. The Burrow just doesn't look to throw to the tight end. Like, we've seen that. I don't think over the last 3 years a tight end has barely had over 50 receptions. So, I think we're going to get pretty much what everyone expects with the Bengals. They're going to win the division. They're going to throw the ball a lot, and Jamar Chase should be the best wide receiver in the league.
Yeah, I think, I'm looking at these. So I have Jamar Chase as my wide receiver 1, and then I'm looking at these, these Vegas totals as you were talking about earlier. Nothing really screams. I think the Bagels, and because we know what their offense is. So I think these lines are a lot sharper because you've seen them now for multiple seasons with those same pieces. It's more sharp to me. It's sharper than if you have, Eli Moore coming to a Browns team and you think he's going to be heavily involved, because there's not as much data out there with that team on the field together, that offense. You may have more opportunity somewhere there than you will on a team like the Bengals. But that being said, because I have Jamar Chase as my wide receiver 1, I look at his total of 1275.5 over under receiving yards. And I think he's going to have a huge season. Maybe be one of those guys that we're talking about late in the season. Like, can he get 2,000 yards this year? So,
so you think that's his ceiling is 2,000?
I mean, I think that's the number right now that like receivers are chasing because of this 17th game you add. It's a lot more achievable than it was on a 16-game schedule. So, I think he's one of the guys that we'll be talking about that hits that number.
Yeah, and his counterpart Justin Jefferson had 1,800 last year. So, if he sees Justin getting 1,800, he thinks he's very capable of doing the same thing. So I agree with you.
Yeah.
His ceiling is 2,000 yards.
Yeah, I mean, 2021 he had 1,455 in 17 games. The only reason he didn't eclipse that number last year is because he only played 13 games. So, out of anything, I would take that over. I just think Chase is a stud. If he's out there, it should be pretty easy. But again, a lot of these like big time Vegas guys, these sharps, they look at overs as not attractive bets because last season he plays 13 games. That number goes under. That being said, he's my wide receiver 1. I would take that if anything on this Bengals team.
Now, Mike, let me ask you just a random question here. You have the first pick in a PPR draft. Who's your first pick going to?
It just depends on roster construction. But are you talking like a standard 2 running back, 2 wide receivers? Yeah. 2 running back, 2 receivers, 1 flex, so you can start 3 receivers?
Correct.
I don't know that I know that answer yet. I
was just curious if you were confident if it was Chase, if he's your number 1 receiver, if you're going receiver, or if you're going.
I mean, if you can start 4, like if you can start 4, it all depends on roster construction to me because like, it's probably Chase. That being said, if it's like 2 running back and 3 wide receivers that you can start, then I would consider going Bijan 101. But I don't know that I've done enough mocks. My brain right now is so best ball, which I would always go receiver, so I would go Chase.
Yeah, I feel you.
In the underdog best ball draft, I've gone Chase over Jefferson, and then I've gone at this point. That's where I stand, is Chase over Jefferson.
Okay, I was just trying to gauge out your feelings on that. Just random question, but all right, let's segue into the Ravens, who we have at number 2 in the division, finishing. The Ravens are interesting this year, man. I mean, how this is all going to shake out. I mean, do you have any initial thoughts on the Ravens before we dive in?
I have initial thoughts on a question that you just asked me. I want to hear your answer. 101 underdog best ball. Who do you go right now?
101 underdog best ball. I think I'm still going Justin Jefferson.
Okay, so we're flipped on that.
Yeah, but I mean, anytime that you want to go Jamar Chase, I'm willing to take that risk because they're both. It's a coin flip to me between those two.
That's exactly how I would play it. I think we would just coin flip, or we wouldn't coin flip, but we would just switch off. Like, let's say we get 101 6 times the rest of the season. I think we go 3 Chase, 3 Jefferson.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good way to do it. You kind of expand your exposure a little bit.
Yeah.
Back into the Ravens. What's your gauge on the Ravens going into this year? How well do you think they're going to perform? I mean, I know we dove already into the rankings, but
I think they're going to be awesome. Monken comes in. Everyone thinks that he's going to do really well there. Fast pace, throw the ball more. Zay Flowers, you know how I feel about him. I've thought that just watching his film and seeing him play ball, it's just, you know how big of an eye test guy I am. I've been on Zay Flowers at a very, very early period before the draft, even, as a prospect this entire year. But then I saw him get drafted to the Ravens, and I was unsure about how to feel. I just saw him at a few other places that I thought would have been awesome. The more that I think about it, the more I like this landing spot for him because of the type of receiver he is. I don't know what it is about his style, Andrews' style, and Lamar Jackson's that I think it's going to fit so well. And then you have J.K. Dobbins, who I think is going to also have a huge year. So I'm really excited. It's interesting. Like, it's so hard for me not to take the Ravens as the first place team.
Yeah.
Quite honestly, before the season starts, I may get flipped on that. You have Roquan Johnson, you have Patrick Queen, like their defense is going to be really good too. So, it's hard for me not to say the Ravens are the first place team this division. It's just so hard to go, back to back to back like that. But we're going to find out. That's where
I mean, I understand your hesitation on Zay Flowers when he went there. I mean, the Ravens had the third fewest passing yards in the NFL last year. Like they over the last couple of seasons, they just haven't thrown the ball well. And a lot of people credit that to the poor wide receiving room. That's why they drafted Zay, and that's why they paid Odell Beckham Jr. How well he's going to do that still remains to be seen. But they still ended up going 10-7 last year. And Todd Monken, I know people say he's a pass-heavy guy, but I just want to put that in perspective. He is coming from the Georgia Bulldogs, who won the national championship the last 2 seasons. In 2018, Todd Monken helped the Bucs set numerous club records when he was the offensive coordinator. They set records in total yards, passing yards, and passing touchdowns. So, I mean, if he was able to do that with the Buccaneers, who's to say he can't help improve just slightly the Ravens passing offense? And I think if they do that, I mean, Lamar Jackson has number one quarterback upside. Like, he could literally be the number one scoring quarterback by the end of the year. I feel like 1,000 rushing yards is pretty set in stone for his projected rushing total every year. And I mean, he played 12 games over the last 2 years, but if he has a full season in him, last year I think he was on pace for 3,500 yards and 26 touchdowns. If he did that along with his 1,000-yard rushing season, you're just talking about a top 3 kind of quarterback there. So, and
if you think 1,000 rushing is set in stone, you should take a look at his over total because it's 725.5 is where Vegas has that. So that's a lot of room if you want to go ahead and smash that over. It sounds like.
Yeah, I would feel comfortable smashing that over. I think they have that because he played 12 games in each of the last 2 seasons. So,
well, that's what I'm saying. Like there's opportunity there for overs. If you mentioned earlier that a lot of times that number is surprisingly lower than you expect. So if you have a 275-yard cushion, then that's probably something worth taking a look at. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I'll definitely be visiting that one when I'm looking to place some future bets for this season. Something to keep in mind. But J.K. Dobbins, one of the reasons why we're so high on J.K. Dobbins is this Ravens offensive line. They rank 4th in the league going into this season. They have a top 5 offensive line. Like that's just going to help J.K. Dobbins have an even better year. It's very possible that J.K. Dobbins leads the league in touchdowns, rushing yards. Like he's capable of doing that thing. So I am definitely pretty high on him this year. Let's see. Where do we have J.K. Dobbins? Where are you comfortable drafting him?
So he's my RB15. He's actually your RB15 as well. I like Dobbins. I think he's going to have an awesome year if he stays healthy. And you know how I feel about, drafting based on injury. Like running backs, I don't really factor that in much because it can happen to anyone.
Yeah.
I think this will be his best year as a Raven. I've always thought he's like a pretty good talent and have been excited to see him finally be healthy and fed the ball like he can and will eventually support. So this is the year for Dobbins for me. I think his ceiling's high. I look at his rushing touchdown over under at 6.5, and I think he's going to have double digits. So that's something I would take a look at. So anyways, yeah, I mean, as you're just talking about the Ravens having the fourth best offensive line, like where are the Browns offensive line? They've got to be right up there too.
They're actually, I'll give a little hint. They are number two in the NFL.
So you as we're talking through this conference and why we're so excited for it, it's like we've already talked about two of the best offenses. Now they have, two of the best offensive lines when you throw the Browns in there. I mean, this is going to be so fun. Right? Yeah, there's just so much.
Yeah, I think the real question when you're talking about the Vikings is which wide receiver out of Zay Flowers, Bateman, and OBJ are going to be drafted.
Ravens. I think you just said Vikings.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ravens. Yeah, but when we're talking about these Ravens wide receivers, the question is who to draft and where to draft them. Right now, Bateman average draft position is 48th wide receiver, Flowers is 46, and OBJ is 52. So they're kind of right in that range. And it seems as of late that people are jumping on this Flowers bandwagon now that Bateman kind of has this Liz Frank injury he's working with. And OBJ is 30 years old, didn't play last year. I mean, what's left in his tank? We'll find out. But I think we're both in agreement that Zay Flowers is the wide receiver that you want to draft. And drafting him as the wide receiver 46, there's going to be some value there. Mark Andrews is the number one target on the team, but Flowers should work in as the number two pretty quickly.
Yeah, and if you're looking to get some exposure with him in like a best ball underdog format, I would go get him now because you're just going to hear a bunch of hype all off season, and his ADP is going to he's one of these guys that the off-season hype is going to be really big, and it's going to just drive that ADP all season until you're getting ready for drafts. So,
yeah, absolutely. All right, well, how about the Browns? I know we just mentioned their prolific offensive line, how it ranks number 2 going into the season. That's one of the reasons why I personally have Nick Chubb so high. I think Nick Chubb is going to be the number 1 scoring running back at the end of the season. I mean, this Browns team is going to be really good. Last year they had the 5th most rush attempts in the NFL. They like to run the ball, and they're going to continue to run the ball.
Yeah. I'm going to keep doing this to you anytime you do it. Mm-hmm. You said Nick Chubb's going to be the number 1 scoring running back, like fantasy point scoring or like touchdowns.
I'm kind of still deciding there. I think he will end up with the most touchdowns.
So when you say he's the highest scoring running back, you're saying touchdowns, not RB1 in fantasy football.
Yeah, that's what I was referring to right there. Is he's gonna score the most touchdowns in the NFL.
Okay.
Highest scoring running back. Fantasy wise, it's tough. I don't know if he'll be the number 1 fantasy scoring running back, but I think he's going to lead the NFL in rushing touchdowns at the running back position.
I just want to clarify because I'm not letting you get by with calling him RB1 when I know he's not your RB1 in your rankings. I'm just never going to let you do that. So just wanted to clarify.
That's fine. Of course. We as a little tidbit, we do have our redraft rankings episodes will be coming out in the next couple of weeks. Yeah, we will be diving in and really hashing out all those stay tuned for those episodes coming in.
Yeah, we're gonna figure out how we can post those too. I got to do a little bit of research there. We need to have a live rankings for you, so that I'm sure there's a way that we can go in and create a Google draft, share it with you, so that as we're mocking and changing up our rankings throughout the season, you have a live version of that as you're working through drafts and that kind of thing. So
yeah, absolutely. And also wanted to take this time to mention to all the roadies, all the listeners out there, if you have questions and you want to ask us stuff, email us at thefantasyroadshow@gmail.com and
tweet at us.
Yeah, tweet at us. Fire off your questions. We're willing to hear them and answer them, and really get into depth with you guys. So, so moving on with the Browns, Jerome Ford is someone that we like late in drafts. Jerome Ford right now is being drafted as RB 55, which is just criminally low, I think, with the way that the Browns have utilized 2 running backs in the past 5 years. I think Ford's going to be pretty active, and he's a value right now at RB 55. What do you think about that, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, you know how I feel about Jerome Ford. I've said it on previous podcasts. He's probably my favorite late round flyer, one of my favorite late round flyers in underdog best right now. I think, I mean, you kind of said it. So this is his year to prove himself and solidify that role, and I think he definitely does. So I'm on board with that. Watson, I think he takes a huge step forward. We've seen him be a QB5, top 5 QB in seasons when healthy with the Texans, and I just think he has a better offense than he's ever had. So it'll be interesting to see if he gets to that top 5 ceiling this year or where he ends up falling. But I expect big things from the Browns. Again, they're a team that could win the conference. So I think Amari Cooper, who's a total ball hawk, I saw he tweaked something earlier this week, but that makes you worry a little bit about his age and that wear and tear on his body. But he's such a good wide receiver with such a good quarterback. I mean, you saw what Watson's done with Hopkins. So I think Cooper has a huge year. He's probably got a top 10 ceiling. Elijah Moore is someone I think is going to take a massive step forward. Right now, Vegas has his totals at 45.5 receptions and 575.5 total yards. I would look to take both of those overs.
Yeah, so absolutely.
So yeah, that's what I see when I see the Browns.
Yeah, Cooper right now is being drafted as wide receiver 18. I think that's a value there. If you don't get one of those elite wide receivers, like say if you go running back heavy in the first couple rounds, having Amari Cooper as your wide receiver 1, I'd be totally fine with, even though he's being drafted as the 18th. And I mean, Elijah Moore is a value right now. He's being drafted at wide receiver 50. Like he should be in the 40s. I think arguably in the 30s. So we'll see exactly how that plays out. But and then Njoku, David Njoku, yeah. He's being drafted right now as tight end 10. So another guy to look at if you don't get one of those high-end early round tight ends. Totally fine having Njoku on my team later on in drafts.
Yeah, I mean, I'll guaranteed I'll have one of those 3 guys we just mentioned, if not multiple. So as you were talking through going running back heavy, I was just like, my brain was going of like what 2 running backs would I ever go running back start? And it would be Bijan in the first round. And then if Barkley fell to me in the second round, I'd go Bijan, Barkley, and then Cooper would be my wide receiver 1 that I would add. And I would be super happy about that.
Yeah, there's not too many wide receivers after Cooper, in my opinion, that you'd be fully comfortable having as your wide receiver 1. But he's definitely like kind of that tier break for me. So definitely keep an eye out for that if you do end up going running back early.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's get into the Steelers, the Schittsburg Steelers.
Steelers.
Yeah.
So another team I'm not going to have a lot of bad things to say about, honestly. Like I just think they're a tier below. I think they're a tier below the rest of these other 3 teams, as I mentioned in the intro. But I think Pickett is their legitimate franchise quarterback who's going to take a huge step forward this year. I think Najee Harris and where he currently is being drafted is undervalued, whereas I've always kind of thought he was overvalued in the past. Deontay Johnson, he is a great wide receiver that doesn't get enough credit. George Pickens, to me, is probably going to the biggest step this year. Him and Pickett have that already established chemistry. I think he's physically one of the most talented wide receivers in the league. And I think that he takes a huge step forward this year. I look at his touchdown total of 4.5, and that's interesting. But anyways, Freiermuth is just your Heath Miller 2.0. Great piece on a successful offense. Again, will it be this year that they compete? Their win total says they're not too far off. But I think it's probably one more year until they're like, we're talking about anyone can win this division. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I can understand that. I think we definitely need to see a lot of strides from Pickett and this offense. I've said it before. I've said it pretty exhaustingly. I'm not excited about Matt Canada's offense. They didn't, in my opinion, they didn't do a lot to improve this offense. They're just hoping for the maturity level to rise with Pickett and Pickens and Freiermuth and these young guys that should be the core of this offense. But Najee Harris is being drafted at RB12. And just like in what I was talking about before, if you go wide receiver heavy in the first 2 rounds, a lot of our drafts, Mike, that we've been doing is we go wide receiver, and then we're able to grab Najee as our first running back. Totally uncomfortable having him as my number 1 running back on my teams this year. And then the real question for me is Pickens and Johnson, right? Deontay Johnson is being drafted at wide receiver 34, and George Pickens is being drafted at wide receiver 36. So there's a lot of people that are going to be set with this option of who to draft. And I think we are both in agreement, and from the Fantasy Roadshow, draft Pickens. Pickens has the higher upside. Deontay Johnson had a statistical anomaly last year where he didn't score any touchdowns on like 80 receptions. Just doesn't ever happen. So you're going to see his receiving touchdowns go up. But we both think that Pickens is going to make the steps this year and solidify himself as the number 1 receiver on the team. And I think I just noticed it. I pointed out to you, I was looking at the depth charts, and previously it had Deontay Johnson as wide receiver 1 on the team. Now it has George Pickens as wide receiver 1 on the team. So I don't know if that's any indication of what's to come, but I think so.
I do want to point out that you didn't always feel that way this season.
No, early on this offseason, I was definitely on the side of Deontay Johnson as being drafted criminally low. And as this offseason has progressed, be water, stay fluid with what's going on in the changing environment. And I've swayed. Mike has helped me sway my opinion and to go in the Pickens draft order, because it's hard to argue with the facts that Pickens is just a more talented receiver. Like if you're betting on talent and opportunity, it just showed last year. I think Deontay Johnson had 81 more yards than Pickens last year. Like that's not much of a differential here when you're talking about Johnson being the number 1 receiver. So yeah.
Well, here's what Vegas says. Vegas has Deontay Johnson at 800.5 yards, Pickens at 750.5 yards. And then Deontay Johnson, they have his reception total at 82.5, and they have Pickens at 55.5. So it's definitely getting a lot closer between the two of them. And I just think Pickens is a better talent. He has more chemistry with Pickett, and they're going to grow together a lot. So that's where I stand on those two.
Yeah, I would even say that Deontay Johnson has the higher floor over Pickens, but Pickens has the higher ceiling. So if you're looking for a safer pick, if early on in the draft, if you kind of swung for the fences and you took some very risky high ceiling picks and you want to get someone that's more safe, higher floor in that range, then Deontay Johnson's the pick there. But if you want to swing for the fences like most fantasy teams want to do, George Pickens is the right move.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I think it depends on your scoring format. Like Deontay Johnson's a safer, like just look at their reception totals there. There's a big disparity there. So like full point PPR, then yeah, I'd probably agree with your higher floor, but I just think Pickens is way better, and it's going to kind of be the alpha in that wide receiver room this year. So I'm probably not ever drafting Deontay Johnson, and you'll see Pickens on some of my teams.
Yeah, I see what you're saying here. So be on the lookout for Deontay Johnson to make Mike's do not draft list.
100%.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that about does it for our AFC North divisional breakdown here on the Fantasy Roadshow. Be on the lookout. We're breaking down every division moving forward. We got a couple great episodes coming up this week. We're diving into injury updates with Dr. Jesse Morse. Is that right, Mike? Did I get the name right?
That's right.
All right. Well, so yeah, be on the lookout for that. And did you want to add anything before we head out?
Yeah, Dr. Jesse Morse with the Fantasy Doctors. He'll be coming this week. We'll be doing our injury recap, or I guess landscape. I would call it injury landscape. So we'll get some updates on some of these important fantasy impact players from him. Going to be an outstanding episode. But yeah, I mean, I want to wrap up the AFC divisional breakdown. I think it's going to be one of the most exciting divisions. Bengals, Ravens, Browns will be duking it out pretty much all season for first place and hold of that division. I think you'll see. I also want to summarize guys that you'll be seeing on my teams that I draft as we're mocking and as we're releasing Best Ball Fridays. I think you'll be seeing me with shares of Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, J.K. Dobbins, maybe some Mark Andrews, definitely some Zay Flowers, definitely some George Pickens and Najee, and then Deshaun Watson, Amari Cooper, Elijah Moore, maybe a little bit of Njoku in there. So those are probably the players that I'm targeting in this division, and just wanted to leave you guys with that as well.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I'm right there with you. I think a lot of our drafts are looking very similar these days. So yeah, I agree with every one of those players you mentioned, and this is going to be a great division to watch for. So definitely keep a close eye to this one. But after all that's said and done, everybody knows what to do. Buckle up.